to the Aquanut Podcast. This is part 2 of the episode with Rob Lowry. Enjoy. All right, so CYA, Cyanuric Acid, in my retail store, sorry, just hit the mic. In my retail store, I get people all the time coming in, and the only thing that they've been doing is just putting tablets in their skimmer. They've been doing that for a long time. So they come into my store because they've got a problem. And people typically either walk into my store because they, A, are testing the water every week, they're staying on top of it, or B, they've got a problem and I need to fix it. And when they've only been using tablets, it causes problems. You just mentioned it, it causes a high CYA, and because they don't know what CYA is, and I bring it up to them, they have a very high CYA, and I tell them, hey, you need to start draining water out of your pool because that's the only real way of getting rid of it. There's some products out there that claim to, but I haven't found that they work in the real world. So I become the bad guy. I'm the guy that is the store owner, and I'm just trying to take this customer for a buck because I'm telling them to drain the pool because they're got a high CYA and they've never even heard of that. They don't know what cyanuric acid is, and then I mention all of this. How can I explain that to someone who has had a pool for 20 or 30 years, and this is the first time that a guy that they're coming to, and they've not even heard of this the whole time. They've just been putting tablets in, and now they have problems such as kids having rashes because the pH is super low, because let's face it, trichlor tabs have a very low pH.
Sure.
So how do you explain that in layman's terms so that I'm not the bad guy? I don't want to be the bad guy.
Well, I don't know that there's a way to make you out not to be the bad guy, although, you are like a doctor and you may have some bad news, but it's not your fault. So, it's explaining to somebody their appendix has to come out, and it's not your appendix, but you found out that they have a problem. So cyanuric acid for many years was considered just a chemical that prevented chlorine from being destroyed by sunlight in water. And so it was thought of that way for years and years and years. And some people today even still believe that chemical is just in the water to keep the chlorine from being destroyed by sunlight. And so they think too much of it's not a problem. But the fact of the matter is that with today's technology and today's research, we're actually able to find out that, chlorine is bound up with cyanuric acid, and the amount of chlorine that's available in the pool is quite a bit less than we ever thought it was. And the problems that people are experiencing, especially with algae, are primarily due to either just lack of chlorination to begin with, so there's not enough chlorine there, or that there's too much cyanuric acid in the water, and as a result, keeping the chlorine level constant without compensating by having a higher chlorine level with the highest cyanuric acid level. They don't compensate for it and try to keep the same amount of chlorine that they've been using, yet the cyanuric acid has been growing. Mm-hmm. And cyanuric acid is, when we want to put chlorine in water, we need to make a chemical that we can get the chlorine into the water. Chlorine as an element is gas. So we can't just have a tank of chlorine by our pool. That would be silly, right?
Dangerous.
So we can't do that.
Yeah.
So So the next best thing is to combine chlorine with something. And over the hundreds of years since it was discovered, people have been adding chlorine to various solutions and things so we can use it. So we make it a liquid and combine it with sodium and make sodium hypochlorite. We combine it with calcium and make calcium hypochlorite. So it's calcium chlorine. And then we combine it with lithium and make lithium and potassium and so on. So we combine it with practically everything we can combine it with.
Right.
One of when they discovered cyanuric acid, not discovered it, when they started using it, was practically around 1956, 58, somewhere around there. And they found out it's from a chemical standpoint, it's a six-sided molecule. Okay? It's a six-sided ring. Okay? And each of those points on the ring has a carbon and a nitrogen.
Okay.
We're not going to get into too much chemistry, all right?
Please.
But carbon and nitrogen.
Going over,
I mean, you can
going
understand a C and an N, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So every other point is a C and an N.
All right.
Okay. A chlorine can attach to an N. Okay. So we could take cyanuric acid and send chlorine in there, and the chlorine will hang off of each one of the ends. Okay. There's 3 ends on there. Trichlor. Okay, so we can hang 3 chlorine molecules off of a cyanuric acid molecule. We can put it in water, and both of them are beneficial in the water. The cyanuric acid prevents the chlorine from being destroyed by sunlight. Chlorine kills the things and oxidizes the stuff in the water. It's a good deal. Problem is that the cyanuric acid builds up. And the cyanuric acid is, in round numbers, about 50% of the molecule when you put it in the pool by weight. So as you put in, it's a little bit less than that, but the bottom line is it is when you put 10 parts per million of chlorine in the pool by using trichlor, you put in 6 parts per million of cyanuric acid. And the cyanuric acid builds up and the chlorine goes away.
Gets used up.
Okay, it gets used and the cyanuric acid stays there. And then you add more and it builds up and builds up and builds up. And the more there is, the less chlorine that is available by percentage.
Right.
So as it builds up to a very high level, you have really minimum amount of chlorine that's in the pool doing anything. So we have found in some pools that when we lower the cyanuric acid level, most of the problems go away.
I'm looking for your target. What is your target?
For cyanuric acid?
Yes, sir.
50 parts per million.
50 parts per million. That's your target.
Right. And you can imagine that the average pool, we've done research and we know this, the average pool uses about 1 part per million of chlorine per day. And that would be in full sunlight, no shade or structures around it so the pool's in any shade. So if it was in complete sunlight during the summer, it would lose 1 part per million of chlorine per day. In addition to that, if you use the pool a couple of times a week with the average family and so on, you're going to have a couple of parts per million for people. So the amount of chlorine you're going to need this week is about 10. That's it. So you need 10 parts per million of chlorine in your pool. And if you use trichlor, you're going to get 6 parts per million of cyanuric acid. And if you start with 30 or 40 parts per million of cyanuric acid, in 1 month, your cyanuric acid is going to go up by 25.
Okay. Now let me just clarify that, because I know there's some people watching or listening to this that are now freaking out, because you just said you need 10 parts per million of chlorine, and that's too high. So you don't want to have just it boosted up to 10 parts per million. You want to add that over time.
This is the consumption. This is the consumption. This is not,
right.
You don't need to put 10 parts per million of chlorine in your pool.
Right.
What I'm saying is this week, your pool is going to need 10 parts per million of chlorine.
Yeah.
And the question is, how are you going to get it in there?
Correct.
Okay. So if you have a floater or feeder or even a jug of chlorine or a saltwater chlorine generator, you need to have it dispense that over a period of a week. And it's really not much.
No.
You know, we talk in parts per million, and everybody would agree that 1% is pretty small. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So it takes 10,000 parts per million to equal 1%. So how small are we talking about? It's literally the proverbial drop in the bucket.
Correct.
Yes. So we're not talking about very much. When people go, oh my God, you've got 2 parts per million of chlorine in your pool. It is 2 ounces of chlorine and 15,000 gallons of water.
Right.
Okay.
When people are talking about salt systems and making chlorine that way, they're adding that, but you just said that we only need a couple of parts per million of chlorine in the pool. Now, I get people come in that say, I'm allergic to chlorine.
My answer has been the same answer for 40 years. Most of my opinion, professionally, if you were allergic to chlorine, you would probably need to be living in a bubble. Okay, chlorine is ubiquitous. It is everywhere. It is in drinking water. It's even if you drink bottled water and you put some ice in it, the ice has chlorine in it. Chlorine is in probably 70% of all medicines. It is in table salt. It is in food. It is in everything you cook. It's almost impossible not to run into chlorine.
Right.
And so people that say they are allergic to chlorine, my opinion is that they may have a sensitivity to what's called a chloramine.
Can you explain the difference?
And I will explain the difference. Chlorine in water is just chlorine plus water. And chemically, if anybody out there wants to know, chlorine plus water makes what's called HOCl. Not too difficult to get. The name of that is called hypochlorous acid. And that is the stuff in water that kills things. Hypochlorous acid, or HOCl, is the killing form of chlorine in water. And it's what chlorine becomes when you put it in water. So those things are in there, and that's what kills everything.
Well, that basically what I wanted to get to. That's chlorine. Now, chloramines.
Okay, yes, I forgot I was talking about chloramines. Sorry, may have to edit that. But
you're fine.
In any case, the other thing that many things that get into water are amine compounds or ammonia. And you may know that sweat and urine, we hope that nobody's urinating in your pool, but the fact of the matter is that even among professional swimmers, something like 40% of people urinate in the pool. So urine is loaded with ammonia and uric acid and urea, and those things break down into ammonia, plus the ammonia that's already in them. And people sweat a lot when they're swimming and playing and even sitting in a hot tub. They sweat a lot. So there's a lot of ammonia in the water, and ammonia very, very quickly combines with chlorine. If the ratio of chlorine to ammonia is big, more chlorine than ammonia, then chlorine destroys the ammonia. If there's not enough chlorine to destroy the ammonia, then it combines with it. And when it combines with it, it actually creates a new chemical. And therefore it has a new chemical name, and it's called chloramine. And it is a combination of chlorine and ammonia. And these chloramines they can be smelled at as low as 0.2 parts per million, even smaller than a part per million. And they are skin sensitizers. They are irritants for skin and eyes and throats. And so if you have chloramines in your pool, you can have eye irritation, skin irritation, and so on. And so these are things that are irritants, and my personal opinion is people that claim that they are allergic to chlorine probably have a sensitivity or have been swimming in a pool that has lots of chloramines in it.
Ergo, a pool that has not been maintained well.
That's correctly. If there are chloramines present in your pool, it means that you did not have enough chlorine in the pool when people were swimming. And therefore, the ratio was not high enough to destroy the ammonia, but combine with it. And now, to get rid of it, we have to increase the ratio even higher to get rid of the chloramines. So to get rid of the smell around the pool and to get rid of the chloramines, you add more chlorine. And we do this by what has been termed either shocking or superchlorination. And so you do that by mathematically taking 10 times the amount of chloramines that are in the water, 10 times that amount in the form of free chlorine will get rid of them. So you superchlorinate and they go away. And I have been to many big commercial pools where the smell of chlorine is very, very high. And when you smell that chlorinated odor that you smell around a pool does not mean they are over-chlorinating. It means they are under-chlorinating. And I have been to pools and they go, wow, thank God you're here. They're over-chlorinating, can't you smell it? And I go, yes, if you'll get me a lot of chlorine, I'll make the smell go away. And here is the thing about chlorine and smell. Chlorine in water does not smell.
Correct.
And I can prove it to you this way, 2 ways. First way, you put in your washing machine 1 cup of Clorox into your washing machine and wash your white clothes. In your washing machine, 1 cup of water is 600 parts per million of chlorine. And so how does your washing machine smell? Fresh, sweet, nice, good?
It's fine.
Yeah. Okay, take the cap off a bottle of Clorox. Don't put your nose over the bottle, by all means. Don't do this. The way you do it, the way we do it in a lab, is you hold the bottle here and you go like this. And you kind of push some of it towards you. But if you take a bottle of chlorine and do that, it doesn't smell as bad from that as it does around a pool.
An improperly maintained
Improperly maintained pool. But if a pool is really smelly, you can smell it. And they're only keeping, what, 4 parts per million of chlorine in the pool? Guess how many parts per million of chlorine is in that jug of chlorine?
What's that?
50,000.
50,000.
50,000 parts per million.
And yet
it doesn't smell.
Barely
Smell. And if anything, it smells fresh or sweet or sterile or something, but it doesn't smell like the pool.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So chloramines in the water are irritants, they're smelly, they're an indication that you've been under-chlorinating. And And it may not be your fault. Don't kill yourself over it. The fact of the matter is you may have had 20 kids jump in.
Yep.
And when you got 2 parts per million and you have 20 of chlorine in a pool and you have 20 kids jump in, now you got 0 chlorine.
Yep. Go on.
And your chlorine generator cannot keep up with that. And that's really important that people understand that, because your chlorine generator it puts out the same amount of chlorine regardless of how many bathers are in your pool.
It does not adjust for the condition.
In fact, unless you buy automation,
Right.
nothing is chlorine on demand. Nothing is. So the only thing you can do is, if you got a bunch of kids coming, add some more extra chlorine before they get there.
Right. So I explain this to people at my sales counter. They come in, they say, my pool's got too much chlorine, or I'm getting this irritant, my eyes, and I explain to them the way to get rid of that chlorine smell is exactly what you just said, to add more chlorine. And they look at me with this look on their face. They think that I'm lying to them. So I'm happy that a chemist just explained that, because it's one of those obstacles that me behind a counter at a retail store has to overcome. And I'm explaining this as like, I'm going to put this more bluntly than you did. You are not allergic to chlorine. There is something like 0.001% of people that actually have an allergy. All of the rest are getting their rashes, their eye irritants from either chloramines or very low pH in a pool. That's where those rashes are coming from.
We say very low, and I am. We get kind of blinders on and tunnel vision sometimes about what we're doing, and we think, oh my God, the pH is 6.8. You realize, of course, that the pH of a soda is 3.5.
Okay.
A cup of coffee is 4.0.
Wow. I thought it was a little higher than that. I know hot sauce, because we carry hot sauce in our stores, very low, because it has to be due to
it's acidic. Yes, it's acidic. So because you get tomatoes and all those things in there, but the bottom line is that there are lots and lots of things that we drink and eat and put on our bodies and stuff that are a whole lot less than pH 7. But in the pool industry, because we deal with 7.2 to 7.8, we think anything below 7 is bad. 7.0 is actually neutral.
Right.
So, but you drink a can of Coke and it's 3.5.
Right.
So our bodies are amazingly resilient, and we can be exposed to any number of things with our eyes and that won't cause them to be red or anything like that. So I think that pH irritation to the eyes probably is pretty minor, unless the pH is really low.
Right.
But the pH of our bodies, incidentally, is between 7.35 and 7.45. It's a really narrow range. And people that have a blood pH below 7.35 actually have what's called acidosis. And above that, it is called alkalinosis. And so if we keep and that's one of the reasons that we keep the pH around 7.5 in a pool, is because it's very close to the pH of our body.
Right.
And so we want to keep it there, and we're comfortable there.
But it also affects the usefulness of chlorine. Is that correct?
Well, it affects it less than we used to think.
Okay.
And the reason is that we did not realize that much of the chlorine was being bound to cyanuric acid.
we're back
and
to
so
cyanuric
we get
acid
back to
again.
this cyanuric acid thing, and cyanuric acid has been the gorilla in the room that we didn't know about. And this has caused us to have these problems. And the cyanuric acid has been, it binds up the chlorine, doesn't make it unavailable, it only makes it's in equilibrium with the part that's available. Understand? So we have this amount of chlorine that is bound and this amount over here that's not bound. And as some of this gets used, some of this transfers. And that's what we call equilibrium. And years ago, when we didn't think cyanuric acid bound up all the chlorine, the amount of that HOCl that we talked about, the amount of that was in the water is in equilibrium with a non-killing form. Okay, the HOCl that we talked about, not too difficult, try not to get too chemical.
Right.
The HOCl that we talked about, it actually dissociates, which simply means it comes apart. Okay, it dissociates into an H and an OCl. Okay, again, not rocket science here. HOCl becomes H and OCl, right?
Okay.
The OCl part doesn't kill anything. HOCl is, like a special forces guy. Okay, but nonetheless, this kills, this doesn't. So we used to think, and the amount of each of these is determined by the pH in the water. And the chemistry of it is, at a pH of 7.5, you actually have 50-50. 50 here and 50 here, 50%. As the pH goes up, you have less here and more here. As the pH goes down, you have more here and less here. So it's like a balloon that you squeeze. If you squeeze this end, it gets bigger on that end. If you squeeze this end, it gets bigger on this end, right? So there's a fixed amount. And the pH determines how much of each of those there are. And so years ago, they used to say, well, you keep 50-50 and that's a good ratio. If you keep it a little low, actually, you get more of this. So there's more killing form. Okay, that was a good thing. But now that we know that more than 90% of the chlorine is attached to cyanuric acid, that percentage of 50-50 and HOCl and stuff is influenced by how much is actually available. The 90% that's tied to cyanuric acid, that pH thing doesn't affect it at all. It's only the 10% that's available is affected by that pH.
Right.
Okay, so it's a lot less than we thought it was.
Yeah. So here is we're going back to, and we kept on talking about it, but we haven't actually said it. What we used to think we knew turns out that with new science, new studies, is we know something different now, just like we used to, we used to not think that we could fly to the moon. Well, now we've put a man on the moon. So science has come a long way. I bought a chip for this camera that was 128 gigs. Well, just 5 years ago, I couldn't get a chip that was, 10 gigs.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Science has come
Science
a long
advances.
way.
One of the coolest advances I remember in studying chemistry is in the mid-1700s, they believed that there was an element called phlogiston.
Oh, okay, well,
And even the name of that today, I think, that's got to be something they made for a comic, Phlogiston. So for 100 years, they believed that phlogiston was an element that was in everything.
Okay.
And when you burned it, the phlogiston escaped, or the How fast or big it burned meant it had more or less phlogiston in it.
Okay.
So
I've never even heard
this
of
is such an amazing thing, and it was absolutely believed as the God's truth for about 100 years.
Okay.
I mean,
wow.
for 4 generations, people were thinking this has a lot of phlogiston in it, and this doesn't. Okay, this is water and it doesn't burn because it doesn't have any phlogiston in it, and this does burn because it has a lot of phlogiston in it, and it made perfect sense.
I guess.
And then along came a guy and said, no, that's oxygen.
Oxygen.
Okay.
Excuse me. I understand. So oxygen definitely burns.
Well, but oxygen didn't actually replace phlogiston.
Right.
But somebody said, this burns because it gets more oxygen.
Right.
And oxygen makes things burn.
Right. So when you go into your pool guy or pool gal's store and they talk to you about CYA and you have too much of it or too little of it, and your pool guy from 20 years ago didn't even mention it to you, please know that this is information that we have learned, like there is no more, or there never was any phlogiston.
But this cyanuric acid thing is a much bigger thing than we used to think. Mm-hmm. We used to think it had no effect on chemistry or anything else, and it was just there to protect chlorine. And so when people come into your store or when you go to a pool store, and the guy says your cyanuric acid is high, you will need to drain some water out of your pool because there are chemicals that do it, but the fact of the matter is that they haven't enjoyed huge success, mostly because all of them require that in order to work, you need to make the chlorine level 0 before you use it. And I mean truly 0, because most of them are enzymes with dried bacteria. And bacteria are very susceptible to any amount of chlorine. And so if you have any amount of chlorine in there, you put the product in, and if there's any chlorine in there, it kills the bacteria. And then the product only relies on the enzymes to get rid of the cyanuric acid, and the enzymes are not real good at getting rid of cyanuric acid. It's the bacteria that does it. And the enzymes are a catalyst that help the bacteria do it faster. So it works if you can 0 the chlorine.
But then we run into the problem.
So,
people are testing water in the middle of the summertime. It's hot. They want to swim.
They don't want 0 chlorine for 2 or 3 days because then they get an algae bloom.
Right.
Exactly.
So I mean,
I understand that. But the cyanuric acid thing is bigger. And don't misunderstand, there's more ways to peel a banana than one. So if your cyanuric acid is high, you don't need to drain 90% of your pool today.
Right.
You can drain 10% of it this week, 10% of it next week, 10% the next week, and so on, and just drain a little bit out of your pool every week. And then that way, within a couple of months, your cyanuric acid level's back down. You haven't really had any major adjustments to water chemistry because you're only replacing this much water. It's an easier thing to do than dumping all the water and filling it back up. Of course, if you want to get your pool into shape right away, have less problems, save money, use less chlorine, put some borates in there, get rid of that stuff, fill it up, and start doing it right. It's in this book.
And while you are in the process of trying to lower your CYA, use a chlorine product that doesn't have CYA.
It doesn't have CYA.
And so I'm going to ask you a question that I don't know. I've been hearing this be told over the past couple of years that CYA only lives in the top 18 or so inches of pool water, and if you just drain the top level off, you'll get rid of CYA.
Well, yes and no. And the answer for yes and no is, if the body of water was not moving, then it would stratify. And you would have various chemicals at various levels. Because you may have chlorine, cyanuric acid, calcium, so on. It all stratifies. But if the water's been moving, and even from what we call Brownian movement, or even from thermal movement, from being in the sunlight and then being in the dark, hot and cold, hot goes up, cold goes down, and so
thermal layering is what
thermal layering, stratifying. Then probably not. But if the pool's been circulating, it's not stratified. So draining the top part has nothing to do with getting rid of more cyanuric acid than not. But there is a chemical that you can add. It is the same chemical that we use for making the test for cyanuric acid. The test that we use for cyanuric acid uses a reagent called melamine. You add melamine, it makes a turbidity. Then we read through the turbidity to get the reading. You can buy melamine in a larger quantity, throw it in the pool, and it does the same thing as it does in the sample cell. And then you have to get rid of that precipitate. But you end up with a lot of it in the pool, and because of the dynamics of how it precipitates, the precipitated particles are really small. And they're so small, in fact, that with a sand filter, they will go right through it. But if you have a cartridge filter or a DE filter, it will stop.
What is the microns of that?
Probably about 10.
10 microns, okay.
So a sand filter will filter down to about 25 to 30 microns. And so a 10 micron particle will go right through it.
Right through it.
A cartridge filter is 8 to 10 microns, and a DE filter theoretically is 1 micron. So, and there's various things with using zeolites and, activated sand and, green sand and stuff like that. There's other things that you can, glass beads and so on. Those get all kinds of numbers all over the map. But nonetheless, you can also use the melamine and then actually add an old chemical that we used years ago called alum. And alum is a short word for aluminum sulfate. So you can add aluminum sulfate to the water in addition to the melamine, and it drives it to the floor of the pool. And then you can vacuum that to waste. So you can get rid of cyanuric acid actually by using melamine and alum, drop it to the bottom and then vacuum to waste, but you lose some water when you vacuum to waste.
Right.
So, you may lose this much water trying to get all that stuff off the bottom, and the flock, the stuff that's on the bottom, is really light. So if you push the vac too fast, it makes it go back up to the top. But so there are a number of ways to get at that, but the best way, of course, is just to drain some water and fill it back up. Water is usually not expensive.
Unless you're in California, and then it's like $10 a gallon.
Well, actually, in one of my books, I published some of the numbers, but believe it or not, the most expensive water in this country is about $5 for 1,000 gallons. So,
which is, a
15,000 gallon pool, you're looking at $75 worth of water.
In my area, the Greenville, South Carolina area, I priced 10,000 gallons of water at $65. So when I'm telling somebody to drain your pool, I'm actually losing money.
Yeah.
That is not a financial benefit to me I want to make the customer happy so they come back to me when they have a problem and not go to the guy up the road because I told them the truth. I'm not out there just trying to make a buck off of people, and I tell people to drain 2,000 or 3,000 gallons, and they're like, oh my God, my water bill. When in actuality, I mean, you can spend what you said earlier, $200 on chemicals, or you can spend $50 on water.
And really, if you drain it out and then start on a program like this, you're just going to end up with zero problems. Mm-hmm. And even when you do have problems, Pool water problem solver guide, right? Pool water problem solver guide on that page and on this page. So if you do follow this, you won't have problems. If you don't do your maintenance and visit your pool once a week, then you can have problems, and you can see what it tells you to do in the problem solver guide.
So a couple of things that I want to get your opinion on before we wrap this up is I am in an area that it doesn't really get cold. I mean, it's probably in the 50s right now, and people are down there shivering and saying it's cold. But throughout the winter, it's very rare that we will have a long spell that it gets below freezing. So we have a small pocket of people that close their pools. They put winter covers on, and they'll absolutely close their pools down, and they won't circulate the water. And I try to explain to them that it's actually cheaper, especially with the variable speed pump, which we're not going to get into that. I've got a couple other guests that are going to go over that. It's actually cheaper to run the pool through the winter, even if you put a winter cover on to keep the leaves out, but it's cheaper as far as chemistry goes, and to run the pool through the winter in my area. Now, if you're in Canada, whatnot, you talk to somebody up there. I don't know, but in my area, it's cheaper. When you're talking about water that's not moving, this is what we're talking about. Water that's sitting stagnant for 3 to 5 months without moving, and now the water is green or dark green or black. And now we're not talking about easy adjustments.
Well, no, you're not. But in the scheme of things, probably you need to deal with the problem first rather than the balance the water. You still got all that algae and stuff that's in there to deal with. So the bottom line for me is that you need to get rid of the organisms. And they may not be disease causing, so it's not like, it's a swamp thing's going to crawl out of there. You're going to get, coronavirus out of your pool. But the bottom line is that you do have stuff growing in there. Mm-hmm. And for me, the first line of attack would be just to use a lot of chlorine. And just get in there with a lot of chlorine and get rid of everything. And for the most part, chlorine is really good at killing all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And so then it's like, well, how much chlorine do I add? And again, I've tried to create a method that instead of figuring out what the density of the algae colony is and trying to figure out, perhaps the amount of carbon in the water and what we need, dissolved oxygen, dissolved carbon, and things like that. You could go crazy. I usually recommend that they raise the chlorine level up to either 40% of the cyanuric acid level, which is easy to calculate. Cyanuric acid times 0.4. That's how much chlorine you need in a pool. The other way is 25 parts per million minimum of free chlorine. And this is the part that requires babysitting. you need to check the chlorine level to make sure that we can maintain 25 parts per million or 40% of the cyanuric acid level for a period of 24 to 48 hours. Now, when you first put the chlorine in, you will find that the chlorine level is going to take a dive because there's a lot of organisms in there.
It's getting used up.
So what's going to happen is you're going to go from 25 maybe to 10. And that could happen in maybe a couple of hours. So when I say babysit, what we do is we test the water in the beginning, like an hour. After you put it in, see if you still got 25. If it's dropped down to anything less than 20, you add enough chlorine to get it back to 25. Then you test it in another hour. And if it hasn't moved much, then you can expand it, and you expand it by doubling. So if it didn't change much in an hour, check it in 2 hours. If it didn't change much in 2 hours, check it in 4 hours. Didn't change much in 4 hours, check it in 8 hours, okay? So that's the progression. So, but any time that you have to top it back up, you have to start the clock over. But eventually you will get to a point, however long that takes, to where you're at 25, you check it an hour later, it's still at 25. You check it 1 hour later, it's still at 25, you're done. Everything's dead. If it still is going down, you still have to keep topping it up until it doesn't move. When it doesn't move, it's dead. And it could take anywhere from 8 to 10 or 12 hours up to 48 before you actually get to that point, depending on what's growing in your pool. And chlorine's the cheapest thing you can put in, the fastest thing you can put in, and probably the best thing you can put in.
And then
after that's done, you either just wait for the sunlight to get rid of the chlorine, or you can put in a chlorine neutralizer and then balance the pool.
make sure that you get out all the debris. The
yes,
leaves,
of course. You know, so you can sometimes think of chlorine as burning things up, even though it's in the water. Mm-hmm. Oxidation is burning things.
Correct.
So you can think of it as burning things up, and now you have to get rid of the ashes.
So all of the dead stuff, all of the white stuff that floats on the bottom, you vacuum that. And it's best to vacuum that right to waste, to just get rid of it.
Well, yeah, you know, it probably vacuum it to waste, but you can, one of the things you can do also once you kill everything is to add a clarifier. Mm-hmm. And not the alum clarifier, but a liquid polymer clarifier.
Polyclarifier.
Add a liquid clarifier, and that will gather together all those ashes mm-hmm. and trap them in the filter or bring them to the bottom, and then you can backwash the filter and they're gone.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So this book, whoops, I grabbed both of them there. If you want to pick this up, you can get a paper copy or you can get the ebook like I got from Amazon. Is there any other places that you can grab this?
No, it's only available on Amazon as a Kindle book, ebook, uh-huh. or it's available as a print copy. And I've been surprised at Amazon. They finally did a print copy for 8.5 by 11. And you will get it in like 2 days. I can't even send you one myself in 2 days. You know, it amazes me.
Right.
And so, and the printing is great. So, and we've made it cheap enough that I mean, it's $10, you know, and a couple of bucks for shipping. I mean, for less than 12 or 15 bucks, you've got a book that will tell you exactly what to do with your pool, save you money, save you time, you'll be a happier customer.
Okay.
Happier pool owner.
I'm going to find a way to give one of these copies to somebody that is viewing this and leaves a comment down in the comment section, just so that I have some entries. I'm going to give a copy of this to somebody, and I'm going to ship it to them for free. As we're wrapping up, is there anything else that you want people to know? Is there contact information that you'd like to put out
Well,
there?
I'm a consultant chemist and an author, and you can't afford to hire me anyway. But and I don't take too many. I don't take calls from consumers because I would just get hundreds of them, and I wouldn't make any money by trying to help somebody for nothing. So I am a consultant chemist, and when I work and charge customers like big corporations and things, I charge $350 an hour. So
$9.
you know, for $9 you can buy this book.
Buy the book. $9.
In any case, I want people to know that pool chemistry is not a mystery. It's actually fairly easy to understand, and I want to apologize for all the chemical companies in this industry that have made it difficult, because it's not rocket science, it's not difficult to maintain, and it's easy, and we want you to be happy with your pool and to understand that chemicals are just, they're necessary and they're not difficult, and they'll only require a few minutes of your time every week, and you should make that commitment to visit your pool.
Mm-hmm. And a knowledgeable pool guy is not your enemy. We're your friend. A knowledgeable pool guy.
That's right. And we teach people to do that. We have service tech manuals for teaching service pros. We teach a one-day course on nothing but pool chemistry to teach service pros the chemistry of swimming pools. And I've also written a 228-page book on nothing but chemistry. And if anybody out there that's watching this is really interested in all of the chemistry, that book is also available on Amazon as an ebook or a print book, and it's $49.95. It is a 200-page book of chemistry.
Right.
So it is not, it's not for the faint of heart, believe me. So it's got a lot of information in it. We teach people chemistry, and we'd like you to be happy and think of your pool as the chemistry is easy to take care of. And if you don't want to take care of your pool, we want you to hire a certified technician. And that is one of the businesses that I am in, is certifying professional swimming pool service technicians. They have to pass an exam, and we certify them. So if you decide not to do it yourself, hire somebody that's certified, because they'll be following what this book says, and you'll have a great pool. Because the longer that you take care of your pool correctly, you're going to extend the life of your pool. You know, pools today, especially plaster pools, can cost $100,000.
Oh, easy.
You know, and you know, I mean, you change the oil in your car, you polish it, you take care of it. You know, you've got an investment in your pool, and doing the right thing chemically extends the life of your pool. It's your investment.
Right. But just like a doctor that tells you that you need to have your appendix out, don't get mad at us. We typically didn't cause it. We're just telling you what the problem is, and hopefully if you have a competent, knowledgeable pool tech that has gone to some classes, he's going to tell you the truth, or she, and get you right.
In addition, if somebody tells you at a pool store, if they tell you that something is some way or something is a certain way, you can look in this book and find out if they're telling you the truth. Because I put the truth in here, and if they tell you that something's different, I would be finding another pool store. I'd be finding one that when they tell you something, you go home and you look in the book and you go, yep, he's right. But if you go home and you look at this and it says, this is this way, and your pool store said it's another way, get another pool store.
Mm-hmm. And one more thing, we can only diagnose your problem if you tell us the whole truth.
Oh yeah, you know, I have a disclaimer when I actually do answer somebody in writing. when I do answer somebody in writing, I always say, this is based on the information that you have supplied.
Correct.
And so if I don't know the whole story and you left something out, I can't be responsible.
Like you're running your pump for 2 hours
In
a day.
addition, and I also tell people this, we are not responsible for your pool. Meaning that if I tell you to add, I'm going to use the cliche, A, B, and C to your pool, I do not know, first of all, if you bought A and B and C. I don't know if you bought what I told you to buy. So number two is, I don't know if you weighed it or measured it correctly. I don't know if the pool size you told me is the right size pool. And I don't even know if you did your test right.
Happens all
So
the time.
I don't know if you did all that, so you can't call me back and say, I did what you said and now you owe me a new pool. I can't do that. My information that I gave you is based on what you told me. The end.
Well, Robert, it has been an absolute pleasure doing this podcast with you. Thank you for taking the time out of your day and doing this with me. And it's been great.
Well, as you can tell, I am passionate about pool chemistry and passionate about our industry. And I enjoy talking about pools anytime.
As am I. If you have liked this, please subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, leave a comment down below. I will be giving away one of these books, and we'll see you on the next podcast. Thank you for watching.